We talked about hell last week, which is not really a fun conversation, but you can watch that online. But hell will never freeze over. It is an eternal place. And one of the reasons we gather here together as a church, and one of the reasons you are invited, is so that you would never have to think about, wonder about, or experience hell, but you have the opportunity to imagine heaven. And this is what this entire series has been about. The greatness, the amazingness, the wonderfulness, and all the othernesses of heaven. Just absolutely unbelievable, and we can't comprehend what it will be like. And so I grew up in church my entire life, and so we talked about heaven quite a bit, but I never really could comprehend what it would be like. I tended to daydream a lot, but I could never imagine just how great it would be. I just thought it would be like this, but your kids wouldn't have temper tantrums, you know? And so wouldn't that be really wonderful? But it's so much better than that and so much greater than that. And we've been looking at these stories of people who have had near-death experiences, and they have their lives have been changed from this experience. Some were documented dead for an hour and a half, and then they came back to. Some amazing stories, and from the offset of it, we just think like, all right, these people are crazy, they're a little bit wacky, but some of them, they have given up so much to publicly share their story. So a couple of weeks ago, we watched an interview from Howard Storm, and you can watch his interview online from the week that we did that. I think that was 2 or 3 weeks ago. And he was a tenured art professor for the University of Kentucky. He had won Artist of the Year in Kentucky. And while he was on a school trip in Paris, France, kind of touring art museums, he had a perforation of the stomach and died in the hospital. When he experienced what he experienced in the life after this one completely changed him. When he came back he was profoundly changed at the things he saw and the things he experienced. And he began to follow Christ. His wife at the time eventually divorced him. His kids don't believe what he believes. He has lost I don't know if he lost or gave up his tenureship, but he eventually became a pastor because of what he experienced. Now, we're not putting our salvation and our faith into what these people experienced, but we are looking at what the Bible says, and if they've seen just a glimpse of what heaven is, then what we're beginning to see, it is going to be amazing. It is going to be amazing. This morning, what we want to look at is the people who have experienced a near-death experience from our culture and from Eastern culture, Christian and non-Christian. They all talk about this life review. They describe it as either like a PowerPoint of their life or a panoramic shot of their life, or just a life review. It takes all these defining moments in their life and it replays it back to them. And we know in the Bible that there is a scriptural basis for this. Now, at the end of this life and at the final moments before God resets kind of eternity and he makes everything new again, there will be two different events and two different options. So the first is for those people who know Jesus. And every single person here today, you have the opportunity to believe that Jesus is God's Son. To believe that he can forgive you, even you, for the wrong things that you've done in your life. And when you believe that Jesus is God's Son, and you believe and ask him to forgive you, then you know Jesus. Then this part becomes applicable to you today, this first event. And there's a Bible verse in 2 Corinthians chapter 5, verse 10, that talks about this. For we must all, that's every single person, every single believer, appear before the judgment seat of Christ, so that each of us may receive what is due us for the things done while in the body, whether good or bad. That word in there, judgment, there is a negative reaction to that, and as Christians, even, we become fearful of this. All right, well, this is the judgment seat, and we're going to get what's due us, and that's terrifying to us. But when Paul was writing this, that word judgment was a Greek word, bema. And if you've been in church for a long time, you've probably heard of this. It's called the bema seat, and people will refer to this event as the bema seat. And what Paul's talking about, he was talking about the ancient Olympics, which at the time weren't ancient. And the bema was the platform that the judges sat on as they awarded merits for the event. So we can think about our life as Christianity as just the opportunity to compete in the Olympics. And some people are going to be awarded because of what they've done, what they've accomplished. But no one is going to be kind of whipped or mocked or ridiculed because they didn't win. If that's helping you, there is not a judgment of punishment that's happening here. It's a judgment of awards that's happening here. And this is the life review that every Christian can look forward to. That God is going to look at our life and reward us for living the Christian life. Reward us for our faithfulness and for other things. Then there is a second event, and this is the second option that people can choose to participate in. And we read this in Revelation chapter 20, verses 11 through 13. Then I saw a great white throne and him who was seated on it. And I saw the dead, great and small, standing before the throne, and books were opened. Another book was opened, which is the book of life. And the dead were judged according to what they had done, as recorded in the books. This second event, if you've been in church a long time, it's called the Great White Throne Judgment. These are people who this is for people who chose not to ask Jesus to forgive them. And so they are now, this event is like a sentencing. It's not an award ceremony. This is like a court hearing, a sentencing. And they have, for these people who have made the decision, I'm not going to ask Jesus to pay the price, to pay my penalty. I'm going to pay my own penalty. This is the event where that happens. All right, here is your life laid before you. Here now is your sentence. And every single person can avoid this simply by asking Jesus to forgive us. That is why he came. He became a man, came to earth, lived and died on the cross so that no person would ever have to see this. But it is our choice. And so as Restoration Church, we're not going to trick you. We're not going to put you in a chicken wing. We're not going to force you to believe like we believe, because that's not our job. We just want you to hear about how great Jesus is. He changed my life when I was 14 years old. He changed Pastor John's life when he was in his 20s. He, and he can change your life today. And it's a wonderful thing. And we just want to share that with you, to share that with Dover, to share that with New Hampshire, so that everybody can have the opportunity to imagine heaven, to participate in heaven, to show up at that eternal award ceremony. Now, the people who had experienced near-death experience, just all, whether from Hindu background or Christian background, they all seem to talk about and experience a life review. Now, this is not the bema seat or the judgment seat of Christ, which we just talked about. This was not the awards ceremony, but it gives us a glimpse of how that will function. All right, because these people, they didn't die. They come back, they're still living, they're telling their story, and for whatever reason, God chose to do that for them. But what they talk about helps us to understand a little bit of what it will be like when that award ceremony happens. So we're going to watch an interview. The first is Howard Storm, who I mentioned already this morning, and the second is Dr. Mary Neal, who was a spinal surgeon, and we talked and we listened to her story on the first week of this series. So just a couple minutes long, we'll listen to them talk about this event.
Howard, tell us about this life review that you had.
There was a number of angels, I call them angels, who had been recording my entire life, all my life, and Jesus wanted them to play out in chronological order the scenes of my life. And the entire emphasis was on my interaction with other people, of course, initially starting out with my mother and father and my sisters, and then, school and friends. And
so you saw it, or
we saw it,
experienced
we felt it, we experienced it. It was really interesting because it was the whole emphasis was on people and not on things. Matter of fact, there were some instances where I had won promotions, honors, awards, and they skipped them. And I said to Jesus, "You're skipping the most important thing in my life. This is what I lived for, to get this award, Kentucky Artist of the Year." Big banquet in my honor and a big cash prize and everything. And he said, "That's not what we're here for you to see. That's not important. What I want you to see is how you treated the students." So what I learned in my life review was that the relationship with my father, I had participated in the breakdown of that relationship as much as he did. He was not a good father to me, and I resented it, and I was angry at him, so I did everything I could subconsciously and sometimes consciously to be as rebellious and as cold-hearted towards him as possible, which only aggravated him more and made him more of a hostile father. So the things that I had seen in my life that where I was the victim and everybody else was the bad guy, I came to find out it was a two-way street. We were both playing this game. As my life progressed from my adolescence into my adulthood, I saw myself turning completely away from God, church, all that, and becoming a person who decided that life was all about the biggest, baddest bear in the woods wins. And now I began to experience Jesus and the angels' literal pain.
What do you mean?
Emotional pain with watching scenes in my life. And here's the nicest, kindest, most loving being I've ever met, who I realize is my Lord, my Savior, even my Creator, holding me and supporting me, trying to give me more understanding of my life. And it was figuratively, not literally, like I was stabbing him in the heart as we're watching this stuff. And the last thing I wanted to do was to hurt him. And I don't want to hurt him to this day. Jesus is a very feeling man. God is a very feeling creator.
What were you seeing played out?
I saw scenes where my sister was in bed crying, and I got up in the middle of the night and went in and put my arms around her and hugged her. And Jesus and the angels were so filled with joy that I had been willing to do that, to try and help her a little bit in her grief. But those were rare, the scenes of my indifference. Just seeing people as objects in order to maneuver around through, or to shift to further my goals and my ambitions.
We did go through a life review, and it was nothing like I would have imagined.
What was the life review like?
My life was laid bare for all its good and bad. And one of the things we did was look at many, many, many events throughout my life that I would have otherwise called terrible or horrible or sad or bad or tragic. And instead of looking at an event in isolation or looking at how it impacted me and my little world, I had the most remarkable experience of seeing the ripple effects of the event when seen 25, 30, 35 times removed.
What I want you to begin to understand is that today matters. Today's not disposable for us. Today's not the just another day for those of us who have decided to follow Jesus. Every day, every interaction is an important interaction. And we don't want to stress ourselves out about that or just worry about doing the wrong thing, because there's grace that we find with God when we mess things up. But to think about that one interaction you have with someone that God's going to be able to show you 30 times removed the difference that it made. In our circle this week, as I sat in the McRory's living room and we were all talking, the one thing I talked about that I was excited to see is back, I think 2008 was the last time we did it, but we used to do this event for teenagers called Summer Launch Party. And Jason Clark, are you here? Jason Clark's sitting over there. Jason Clark, so he's in his 20s now. He came to our church the first time at a summer launch party and gave his life to Jesus at a summer launch party. But the last event that we had, there was 450 teenagers in our parking lot, and I got up and I preached the gospel. And some of those kids never ever saw again, and I likely will never ever see again. In fact, some people who were at that event, they have since passed on, just from drug overdose, from just tragedy. Some of those kids that we know that were there that night, they're not on this earth anymore. The thing I'm excited to see is, it kind of in my life review, is that moment, that 20 minutes of preaching the gospel to those 450 teenagers, how that made an effect for each kid. God's going to show me that. And because we could think it's kind of so disappointed when kids don't come back the next week or whatever. But God is going to show that no moment that we give to God is ever wasted. That one person that you felt like God told you to give to, and then they just took it and they never even said thank you, and you're like, what was the point of that, God? That probably didn't make a difference. And those years, some of you who are, you've got kids who are older than me, and they're not serving the Lord. You think, all those years that we invested into them, what difference did it make? They're not serving the Lord anymore. But God will show you how everything, even the tragedies that were done to you, will work for His purposes, all of it. And we'll get to be a part of that, and we'll get to be excited about that. One thing that we see in Scripture is that Jesus is going to reward us for being faithful. Jesus is going to reward us for being obedient to what He's called us to do. Jesus will reward what matters most. Revelation 22 verse 12 says, behold, I am coming quickly, and my reward is with me, to render to every man according to what he has done. We see in Luke chapter 6, Jesus teaching us what matters most, starting at verse number 27. But to you who are willing to listen, I say, love your enemies. Do good to those who hate you. Bless those who curse you. Pray for those who hurt you. If someone slaps you on one cheek, offer the other also. If someone demands your coat, offer your shirt also. Give to anyone who asks. And when things are taken away from you, don't try to get them back. Do to others as you would like them to do to you. Jump down to verse 35. Love your enemies. Do good to them. Lend to them without expecting to be repaid. Then your reward from heaven will be very great, and you will truly be acting as children of the Most High. For He is kind to those who are unthankful and wicked. You must be compassionate, just as your Father is compassionate. We begin to see that what matters most is loving people. That the things that God rewards the greatest, and the things that God cares about the most, is how we treat each other and how we treat those people who are far from God. Again, verse 35, love your enemies. Do good to them. Then your reward from heaven will be very great. As we come in, let me just throw this in here. As we come into the last couple of weeks before the elections, let's make our Facebook posts with the fruit of the Holy Spirit. Not with venom and with just just gross and hatred. We have to love people who we disagree with. So how else can you stay married? You got to learn. You've got to learn these things. Do you know that you can do great things with wrong motives? You can have all the appearances that you love someone, but do it with wrong motives. We have 4 boys, and I love them all. They all have different gifts. We have one of our kids is really, really brilliant. Not that the others aren't, but in this one area, they're all brilliant in different ways. They got different sets of gifts. But one of our children, I mean, it's so brilliant. It's frightening. For years, he would come up to my wife, Michelle is on the front row, and he'd say, "Mom, I brought you a piece of candy." And she's like, "Oh, that's so sweet. Thank you so much." And then he'd soak it all in, and he'd say, "Can I have one too?" And she's like, "Absolutely." And he would do this all the time. And finally, she figured out what's going on. He wasn't really bringing her a piece of candy. He knew, as a 3-year-old and a 4-year-old, that if he gave her a piece of candy, of course she's going to let him. "Mom, I brought you a cookie." "Oh, thank you so much. Can I have a cookie too?" "Sure." So it's frightening because he's still doing it, but he's gotten so much smarter about it that I can't tell if he's ever doing anything nice. You realize, Dad, look, I cleaned the room. I'm like, "Oh, that's so great." And then I realize, because Mom's mad that the other brother didn't clean the room. So he's playing this game all the time to position himself. And you begin to hey, I want you to do things out of the kindness and the generosity of your heart, not because you're playing me. And we can get like that. It's so easy here in church to do stuff. It's so easy to posture ourselves, and this is probably the one thing that's most frustrating to me is when people try to posture. And so what that means is, and this is very evil, but when they try to be something that they're not, and they try to convince you there's something they're not. So whether it's people, "Oh, I just love you so much," and they're, they give me a hug, whatever, but I know that they were just talking bad about me a couple days ago. Get out of here. Are you kidding me? Or when people, it's just little things. If you're ever a boss, people try to do this. Some of it's kissing up, but even that's more acceptable than posturing. It's just this fakeness that's put before us. And we can, as Christians, posture ourselves. We can say, we're a friendly church, but when people come in here and we don't love them. When people come in, we're like, "Oh man, this series, Imagine Heaven's so great." But then if some of you actually started talking about your near-death experience, we'd be like, "Oh, this person is freaky." and we just be begging them not to sign up for our circle, and we're like, and we just think hey, we're gonna take care of people and receive people and accept people, but then we really don't. We have got to just be aware that what matters most to God matters most to us. And we can be about all kinds of things in our life, and there's good things, all right? And so, but just for comparison, and I'm even scared to talk about this. But if our main priority in our life could be to rescue animals, which is not a bad thing, which is a great thing. We've rescued dogs before and different pets. But what matters most to God is rescuing people from hell. What matters most to God is sharing Jesus with people. And you can be about all kinds of things, but one thing's got to be your priority. What matters most to God is going to be what matters most to us. You can petition and get a particular beautiful piece of land to forever be beautiful. Get it so it's conservation land and a big success and a big win, and that's a great thing. And I love if hunting grounds are secured and we don't have to worry about developments coming in, or if I have a beautiful backyard that it stays that way and it doesn't turn into prime tanning. But what matters most to God is people. You can work really hard to reduce your carbon footprint and to live green, which is a good thing. But what matters most to God is people. So we all have different things that we're important about. I remember a long time ago, we're talking over a decade ago, one of our student leaders at U-Turn, he's handing out pamphlets at U-Turn to save chickens, for the proper treatment of chickens, which is important. I want the food I eat to be healthy and, not living in some sort of concentration camp. But I talked to him that night. I said, hey, listen, while we're here, U-Turn, our priority is these students coming in who don't know Jesus, because that is the most important thing that we could ever live for, that we could ever put our life into. And so you want to rescue animals? Rescue them. Do it. But make sure that every human that you're talking to in that process is hearing you're giving God an opportunity to speak to them. We may eventually fill this roof with solar panels and put like windmills on all of our street lights and stuff, and we'll do that. If we could save money, that would be good. But if we do that, the reason we do that is so we could share the good news with people who care about that sort of thing. And so this is touchy, and I probably may have ticked you off. But what I just want you to hear, I'm not putting down the things that you are an activist for, but God's called us to people, to pray for people, to love people, to forgive people, to share the good news for people. It's so easy for us as a church to, now that we've bought a building and and thanks for your generosity toward the parking lot. I mean, that looks amazing. But we can think like, oh man, it's good, it's so good here. We just insulated here, and for it now just to be about the building and about the church people, very easy to do. But what matters most to God is not that we have a good church service where a bunch of Christian people feel good. What matters most to God is that we're a church and we gather together, but then we scatter to share the good news. We come here and we get equipped. We come here, those of you, it's the greatest, it's a great opportunity for us to invite people who don't know Jesus, and maybe that's you, so we can talk about Jesus and share about Jesus, and for other people to see like, all right, well, most of them look pretty normal, and if they're following Jesus, I'm going to investigate him for myself. But that's our priority. Last Sunday, one of my oldest son had a soccer game, 8:30 in the morning. So before church, we were sitting in Newmarket in a freezing cold field watching a soccer game. And soccer more important than church? Absolutely not. And if his game was at 10:30, we wouldn't go because church is more important. But is showing up at church? Is just showing up at church important? No, we don't just show up at church. We serve at church. We participate in it. And is serving at church, just so you can have that checked off, is that what's important? No, we serve. Our motivation is to reach just one more. And you begin to see that everything we do as a Christian following Jesus, we give up and sacrifice so much. You think, like, I would like to sleep in on a Sunday morning. I don't want to show up and volunteer today. I don't have to come. Some people will be showing up at 5:30, a lot of people, next Sunday morning to set up for Fall Fest. a lot of work people have put into that. And you think like, I'm not getting paid for this. Why the heck are we doing this? If you remember, it's for just one more. And you don't know the difference you're making at 5:30 in the morning when it's freezing cold out, but we know God will reward us. It's going to be better and greater than we can understand, and it is going to be worth it, 100%. When we see the impact our life has made, we're not gonna think like, oh man, I would have given up a few of those people for a couple extra weekends. We're gonna think like, if I knew I was making that much of a difference, I would have given up everything. I would have done anything. So I just want to encourage you with that. And as we end this series, Imagine Heaven, I don't want you to forget this. I want this service